The hammer comes down 7 times in the telling, and every blow lands on the same impossible truth. This was never meant to be a lamp. Before it ever held a flame, before the oil touched a single wick, the menorah was something else entirely, something the priests themselves may have only dimly understood as they trimmed its lights each evening. You have seen it in artwork, in synagogues, on the seal of a nation, reduced to a symbol, a logo, a pleasant piece of heritage. But the object itself, the thing that stood in the holy place, was stranger and heavier than anything you have pictured. Picture the weight first, not the finished piece gleaming in lamplight, but the raw beginning of it, a single mass of gold heaped on a craftsman's bench. The book of Exodus says it plainly, though the words slip past most readers: 1 talent of pure gold, hammered, shaped, beaten into form. That is, roughly 75 pounds of the most precious metal the ancient world knew, and none of it was wasted on ornament. It all became the lampstand. Every branch, every cup, every delicate blossom came out of that one solid lump. And when the work was finished, there were no seams to find, no joints where pieces had been joined, no evidence that anything had been added or attached. Now here is the detail that should stop you cold. The instructions in Exodus 25 do not say the craftsman assembled a lampstand from parts. They say he made it, beaten work of pure gold. And every verb in the passage points to the same method: hammering, shaping, forcing the metal to become what it was always meant to be. The branches did not grow by being welded on. They were pushed up out of the single mass, coaxed and beaten until the tree of light emerged whole from the gold. Nothing about this design is practical. A lamp could be cast in pieces, fitted together, repaired when damaged. This one could not be repaired. If a branch broke, the whole thing was ruined. The strangeness deepens when you look at what the branches actually hold. They are not plain tubes or simple rods. Each one carries cups shaped like almond blossoms, with buds and flowers worked into the metal. And this botanical detail is so deliberate, so specific, that it demands a second look. Why would a lamp be shaped like a tree? Why almond branches of all things, with their blossoms frozen in gold? And why 7 flames, not one, not a simple bowl of light, but a cluster of lamps arranged along branches that reach upward like a canopy? These are not design choices a craftsman would make for convenience. You have probably heard the menorah called a candlestick in older translations, which makes it sound like something you might set on a windowsill. The Hebrew word is menorah, and it means lampstand, and the difference matters more than you might think. A candlestick holds wax and a candle that burns down and dies. A lampstand holds oil and a flame that can be fed and tended and kept alive. From the very beginning, this object was built for a fire that was never supposed to go out. The design assumes a keeper. It assumes constant attention. It assumes that someone will come back again and again to trim the wicks and pour the oil. Let that question hang in the air for a moment, because it is the one this entire story turns on. Why build a lamp that requires perpetual care out of 75 pounds of gold, shaped into a tree, designed to burn forever? Why not something simpler, more practical, easier to maintain? The answer is hiding in the details, in the almond blossoms and the beaten metal and the 7 flames. And it is not the answer you were taught in Sunday school, nor the one you will find in a museum caption. You are standing at the threshold of a room that no living person has entered in nearly 2,000 years, and the light you are about to follow was never meant to illuminate a table. It was meant to illuminate something else entirely. The gold was never the point. The fire was. And the fire, as it turns out, was pointing at someone who had not yet been revealed. But to see that, you have to understand what it took to make the lamp burn in the first place. You have to go back to the workshop where the gold was beaten and to the man whose hands did the beating. Bezalel is his name, and Exodus 31 introduces him with a detail that is easy to rush past. God says he has filled Bezalel with the Spirit of God, with ability and intelligence, with knowledge and all craftsmanship, to devise artistic designs, to work in gold and silver and bronze. Think about what that means. The man who shaped the menorah was not merely skilled. The text describes his craftsmanship as something the Spirit of God himself poured into him. The hammer that beat the gold was guided by a hand that was guided by the Spirit, which means the almond blossoms and the branches were not Bezalel's invention. They were revealed to him. This is where the material layer of the story begins to crack open. Because if the design came from God, then every detail is deliberate, and the details are peculiar enough that they demand explanation. The single beaten piece, the almond blossoms, the 7 lamps, none of it is arbitrary. None of it is decorative in the way we usually mean decoration. The gold itself becomes a kind of language, a physical sentence written in a metal that does not tarnish, shaped into a form that cannot be assembled and therefore cannot be unmade. The menorah is a statement beaten out of the earth's most precious substance about permanence and purity and something that predates the world. But there is a shadow on this gold, and it is worth sitting with it for a moment. The menorah that stood in the tabernacle and later in the temple in Jerusalem is gone. It is not in a museum. It is not in a vault. It is not on display anywhere on earth that we know of. The only image we have of the actual temple lampstand, the one that held real flames in the real holy place, was carved into stone in Rome on an arch built to celebrate Jerusalem's destruction. You can still see it today. Roman soldiers strain beneath its weight, carrying it through the streets of Rome in a victory procession, while crowds that had never seen the temple jeered and cheered. The only image we have of the actual temple lampstand is carved into a conqueror's monument, a moment of humiliation frozen in stone. Subscribe and walk with us as we trace what that image means and what happened to the gold that vanished after. If a single word could hold what it means to see the menorah paraded away as spoils, leave the word captured in the comments, or your own word, if a different one rises in you. I will read them. The Arch of Titus was built to commemorate a conquest, and it preserves, almost accidentally, the last known picture of the temple menorah before it vanished from history. The year was 70 after Christ. The temple was in flames. The priests had been killed or scattered, and the golden lampstand, the same design that came from Bezalel's hands, was hauled out of the holy place and paraded through a foreign city as spoils of war. The Jewish historian Josephus, who lived through it, described the spectacle, and his account is one of the few surviving eyewitness records of the object's fate. After that, the trail goes cold. What happened to that gold? Some say it was melted down. Some say it was lost in the chaos of the following centuries. Some still hope it is hidden somewhere, waiting to be found. The search has become its own kind of legend, and many have chased it. But here is what matters for our question. The image carved on the Arch of Titus did not show the temple somewhere off in the background, a symbol among symbols. It showed the menorah as the central prize, the thing worth carrying away, the treasure that proved this was a real temple that had really fallen. Even the Romans understood, without knowing why, that this lamp was different. Hundreds of years later, that same carved image, the Arch of Titus relief, would become the basis for the menorah on the emblem of the modern state of Israel. So the object that vanished still shapes how millions of people recognize Jewish identity today. The lamp that once burned in the holy place became, in its absence, a sign of continuity and hope. But notice what has happened in that journey. The menorah was flattened into a symbol. It became a two-dimensional mark, a silhouette, an emblem of faith and heritage. its physical strangeness, its weight, its impossible construction, its almond blossoms, all of that has been smoothed away. What is left is a shape without the mystery inside it. And that is exactly where our investigation begins to shift. Because the menorah was never a symbol first. It was a physical object made by a man filled with the Spirit, shaped according to a design given by God, and it did something real every single day. It burned, it consumed oil, it threw light into darkness. Before it meant anything, it did something. And what it did continuously without ceasing from evening to morning every day for centuries. That function is the next layer, and it is the one that brings us at last to the question of why this lamp could not be allowed to go out. Think about the room it stood in. The holy place of the tabernacle had no windows, none. The only light that entered that chamber, the only illumination the priests had to work by, came from this single lampstand with its 7 flames. You could close off every other source of light, and the menorah alone would hold back the dark. That is why the instructions in Exodus 27 are so insistent about the oil. The people of Israel were commanded to bring pure olive oil, beaten, pressed, without sediment, so that a lamp could be set up to burn regularly outside the tent of meeting before the Lord from evening to morning. The book of Leviticus in its 24th chapter repeats the command with an almost obsessive attention to the particulars. The lamps are to be set on the lampstand of pure gold before the Lord regularly. Aaron is the one appointed to tend them. The oil must be pure. The wicks must be trimmed. The lamps must burn through the night, every night without exception. This was not occasional worship. This was a standing order, woven into the daily rhythm of a people on the move through a wilderness, and later into the daily rhythm of a settled nation with a permanent temple. Now consider what that meant in practice. Somewhere, in a dark room that no ordinary Israelite ever entered, a priest moved by the glow of 7 small flames. He had oil. He had trimmed wicks, prepared earlier. He had tongs and snuffers, tools designed for the single purpose of caring for fire. Every evening he lit the lamps, and every morning he trimmed the wicks and refilled the oil. And through the long hours of the night, the flames burned on, a point of light in the black heart of the camp. Outside, the desert was dark. Inside, the gold gleamed. And the smoke of burning olive oil, faint and sweet, would have hung in the air. This is the beat that the ancient text returns to again and again. A lamp that mustn't go out, a fire that must be fed, a light that must be kept alive by human hands. And if we are honest, this is also the detail that makes people uncomfortable. Why would a God who can speak stars into existence need a lamp burning in a tent? Why command a perpetual flame if the God of Israel is not dependent on it? The question answers itself if you let it sit for a moment. The lamp was not for God's benefit, it was for the people's. It was a visible physical sign that they were not alone in the dark, that something was being kept alive on their behalf, at their expense, by their priests. That lamp in the dark room was a visible sign that you were not alone, and the rhythm of tending it night after night was an invitation to trust what you could not see. If you want to keep following the evidence into the deeper layers where the physical becomes a bridge to the sacred, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And in the comments, drop the word tended, if that is what rises in you when you picture that single flame burning through the wilderness night on your behalf. Or leave your own word if something else surfaces. But there is another layer beneath that one, and it is the layer that the prophets begin to uncover. The lamp that burned in the sanctuary was not the only lamp in Israel's story. There was another one carried by a boy in the dark, and the text describes it in a way that has echoed down through the centuries. 1 Samuel chapter 3 tells us that before the lamp of God went out, the boy Samuel lay sleeping in the temple, and the Lord called his name, the lamp of God. That phrase, used by the sacred writer, turns the physical lamp into something more than a fixture. It becomes a sign of God's active presence, a fire that is still burning, a voice that is still speaking. So the lamp that must not go out, the lamp of God,
Behold,
is already pointing beyond
light
itself
reveals what was
by the
hidden.
time the prophets start seeing visions. And it is in the prophets that the hidden fire begins to emerge from behind the gold. Jeremiah, in the first chapter of his book, is shown a branch of an almond tree, and God says to him, "You have seen well, for I am watching over my word to perform it." The Hebrew word for almond is related to the word for watching or waking. The almond is the tree that wakes first, that blossoms while everything else is still asleep. And the menorah, shaped entirely out of almond blossoms, was waking and watching and burning all at once. Hold that connection for a moment, because it is about to pull the entire object into focus. The almond tree is the first to bloom after winter. Its blossoms appear on bare branches before the leaves come, a sudden white fire on a sleeping tree. The menorah is that tree, rendered in gold, burning with light. It is a sign of watchfulness, of a God who does not sleep, of a people called to be awake. And the book of Numbers adds another layer to the image. Aaron's rod, a branch of almond wood, budded overnight and produced blossoms, a sign confirming his priesthood, and that rod was kept in the sanctuary near the lamp. A dead branch, suddenly alive, flowering in the presence of the light. This is where the prophet Zechariah enters, and his vision is the hinge on which everything turns. In the 4th chapter of his book, Zechariah sees a lampstand of gold, with a bowl on top of it and 7 lamps on it, and 7 lips on each of the lamps, and 2 olive trees beside it, one on the right and one on the left. He does not understand what he is seeing. The angel asks him, "Do you not know what these are?" And he answers, "No, my Lord." And the angel gives him the meaning, "Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts." Zechariah saw the lampstand burning without being connected to any human source of oil. The 2 olive trees fed it directly, golden oil flowing through golden pipes, no human hands, no priests tending the wicks. The vision is a promise and a question at the same time. It tells Israel that the light will be sustained, that the Spirit will supply what human strength cannot, and it asks them whether they will be awake enough to see it. The 7 lamps on the lampstand are identified in verse 10 as the 7 eyes of the Lord, which range through the whole earth. The light is not just a lamp, it is a gaze. It is God watching, waking, searching. And now the pieces begin to move toward each other. The lamp of gold that was beaten from a single piece, the almond blossoms that speak of watching and waking, the oil that must be pure, the flame that must not go out, the vision of a lampstand fed directly by the Spirit. All of these were in place for centuries, waiting, burning, being tended by priests who did not know what they were keeping alive. And then, in the fullness of time, someone stood up in the temple and said something that every ear in Israel must have recognized as blasphemy or revelation. "I am the light of the world." The Gospel of John records those words in chapter 8, and chapter 1 had already set the stage. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." John is not being poetic. He is making a claim about a person. The light that shone in the wilderness tabernacle, the light that Zechariah saw flowing from the olive trees, the light that had been burning in the sanctuary for centuries, was now standing in front of them in the flesh. The hidden fire had stepped out of the gold. This is the moment the entire structure of the menorah collapses into its true meaning. Every physical detail was a scaffold, and the scaffold has now been shown to hold a person. The 1 talent of gold, beaten into a single piece with no seams, speaks of a being with no division, no parts added, no joints where something else could be attached. The branches, 7 of them reaching out from one trunk, speak of fullness and completeness, of a light that fills the whole space. And the almond blossoms, the watching tree, speak of one who never sleeps, who sees all, who is awake to every corner of the world. The menorah was never just an artifact, it was a promise, and that promise stepped into the world as a person. Subscribe so you can keep following these threads that stretch from the desert sanctuary all the way into the visions of Revelation. We are walking through Scripture and discovery together, and I would love for you to stay with us. If that image of the hidden fire stepping out of the gold has shifted how you see Jesus, comment the word light below. The Apostle John, exiled on the island of Patmos, is given a vision that makes the connection explicit. In the first chapter of Revelation, he turns and sees 7 golden lampstands, and in the middle of them, one like a son of man. Then he is told plainly, the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. The lamp is now a people. The light is no longer a thing to be tended by priests. It has become a community that bears witness, a body of believers who carry the flame into the darkness of the world. And standing in the middle of that light, holding all of it together, is Christ himself. So here is what the evidence has been pointing toward all along. The menorah was never merely a lamp. It was a portrait. The gold was a physical statement about the nature of the one it portrayed. Uncreated, undivided, pure, permanent. The branches were a statement about the community that would flow from him, many lights from one source connected to the trunk. And the flame, the fire that had to be fed, that had to be tended, that hungered for oil, was a statement about the Spirit, the life of God poured into human vessels, keeping the light alive in a dark world. The gold was never the point. The fire was, and the fire was him. The old arrangements, the physical signs, the gold and the oil, they were never the destination. They were the language God used to teach a people who could not yet grasp the invisible. Every priest who trimmed a wick was handling a prophecy. Every drop of oil poured into a lamp was pointing toward a spirit that would one day indwell, not a room, but a person. The entire sanctuary was a classroom, and the menorah was its most persistent lesson. Now the question turns toward you, and this is where the evidence stops being ancient history and starts being personal. You have likely felt it, that quiet dimming. The routines continue, the prayers are said, the familiar words are spoken, but somewhere beneath the surface, the fire feels distant, banked, uncertain. Perhaps you have wondered if God sees you at all, if your light has gone out unnoticed. If that ache has ever touched you, then the almond blossoms on the lampstand were described for your sake. Because here is what the lamp reveals about you. You were not made to be a consumer of light, standing in the dark and admiring a flame that belongs to someone else. The vision in Revelation places the lampstands in the hand of Christ, and it names them as churches, as people, as you. The structure of the menorah, that single beaten piece with many branches, is the shape of a body. Many members, one source of life. The light in you was never meant to be your own. It is borrowed, poured, tended, and it can burn again. The oil is the Spirit, and the oil has not run out. That is the entire promise of Zechariah's vision. The lamp fed directly from the living trees, needing no human strength to sustain it. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit. The fire that seemed to be dying was never dependent on the one holding the wick. It flows from a source that cannot be exhausted. Whatever has gone dim in you was not extinguished. It was waiting to be fed, to be trimmed, to be rekindled by the same hand that formed the gold. If that promise of a rekindled light, sustained not by your own strength but by the Spirit's endless oil, is something you want to carry with you, subscribe so you do not miss the next piece of evidence that makes faith tangible. In the comments, leave the word that captured what the almond blossoms spoke to you tonight. Rekindled, fed, held, or another, because the wick in you was meant to burn. And so you return to the object one final time, to the room that no one has entered in 2,000 years. You stand in the dark, and before you, the gold gleams faintly, catching the light of 7 small flames. The air carries the smell of olive oil and the faint trace of smoke. The branches reach upward, the almond blossoms frozen mid-bloom, the watching tree awake and burning. It is not a symbol, it is a promise, beaten out of a single mass of gold, kept alive through centuries of tending, now placed before you. The hidden fire was never hidden from you. It was hidden for you, waiting in the metal and the oil and the almond wood, for the moment when you would finally see what it was always revealing. The gold was never the point, the fire was, and the fire has a name. It stands in the middle of the lampstands even now, and it is still the light of the world. The only question left is whether you will let it burn in you, or stand in the dark, watching the flame belong to someone else. The lamp is lit, the oil is flowing, and the fire at last has found its way home.